Welcome to SBS News in Easy English. I'm Sam Dover. Turkish warplanes have carried out airstrikes on suspected Kurdish militant targets in northern Iraq. The strikes took place just hours after a suicide attack on a government building in the Turkish capital of Ankara. The Turkish Interior Ministry says 20 targets of the Kurdistan Workers' Party were destroyed in the aerial operation. Earlier on Sunday, a suicide bomber detonated an explosive device near the Ministry of Interior Affairs, and a second assailant was killed in a shootout with police. Local media report that the Kurdistan Workers' Party have claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the attack was a direct threat to peace and security in Turkey.
As a result of the timely intervention of our security forces this morning, the action in which 2 murderers were neutralized is the last stand of terrorism. The scoundrels who targeted the peace and security of the citizens could not achieve their goals. They will never reach it.
Australian home prices have continued to increase for the 8th month in a row and are set to reach a new record high. The latest CoreLogic property data records a 0.8% rise in value in September, meaning that about $38,000 has been added to the average dwelling since January. Last month's increase followed a 0.7% increase in August, taking the pace of quarterly growth to 2.2%. Melbourne Lord Mayor Sally Capp says it's important to recognise that rising house prices are fueled by a shortage in housing, and the focus should be on increasing supply.
We're really seeing so much of a focus on the rising value of property, and yet we know what's really fueling that is a shortage of housing. And so maintaining a focus on housing supply has to be really 3 levels of government involved there. We know from talking to our small business owners, many are still struggling, and so the uncertainty that comes from increasing rate rises, even the threat of increasing rate rises, is really felt on the streets here in Melbourne.
Labor Senator Malarndirri McCarthy says she is confident Australians will vote yes in the upcoming Indigenous Voice to Parliament referendum. It comes as early voting opens today, with the referendum now just 2 weeks away. Early voting centres are opening in Victoria, Western Australia, Tasmania, and the Northern Territory. For the remaining states which have a public holiday today, early voting opens tomorrow. Senator McCarthy says at this important moment she is seeing substantial support for an Indigenous voice to Parliament.
I still remain quietly confident, Sarah. We've been travelling across the Northern Territory. Voting began for us last week, and across remote and regional Australia last week. And everywhere I went in northeast Arnhem Land, we saw on the Tiwi Islands, there is incredible support for the voice.
And in sport, Brisbane Broncos coach Kevin Walters says he is in shock after his team's loss to the Penrith Panthers in the NRL Grand Final. The Panthers beat the Broncos 26 points to 24, with the Panthers' number 7, Nathan Cleary, delivering a dazzling solo display to wrap up the game. Mr. Walters says it's a huge disappointment for his team, and he's still processing where they went wrong.
It's just hard to get your head around what actually happened. So Anyway, yeah, it's very disappointing. I feel for all the players in there that gave so much, but just wasn't enough in the end.
I'm Sam Dover. This is SBS News in Easy English.
Brought to you by SBS and the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales.
Welcome to SBS News in Easy English. I am Julien Heuillet. An out-of-control bushfire in Victoria's east has more than tripled in size, with authorities warning people to leave. The fast-moving fire at Briagolong in the Gippsland region covered 5,000 hectares on Monday. But strong winds have fanned the flames, with the fire now stretching across about 17,000 hectares. Emergency warnings have been issued for the surrounding areas, with people in neighbouring Stockdale and Stratford told to leave before conditions become too dangerous. Those in Briagolong have been urged to take shelter because it's too late to leave. Wind gusts of up to 80 kilometers per hour are making it difficult for more than 650 firefighters who are trying to contain the blaze. A tax on vacant residential land in Victoria will be broadened to try to force owners to develop their land or sell it to someone who will. Victoria's Treasurer Tim Pallas says legislation will be introduced to expand the vacant residential land tax to all of Victoria, including regional areas. The tax currently applies to residential properties across 16 Melbourne metropolitan councils that are unoccupied for more than 6 months a year. The change will come into effect from January 2025. Economists say interest rates will likely be left unchanged at the Reserve Bank of Australia's meeting later today. Australian borrowers are expected to be spared another rate rise after 12 rate increases in the last year of Dr. Philip Lowe's tenure. The board, now under Michelle Bullock's leadership, is expected to wait until the release of quarterly inflation figures on October 25 before it changes the rate. The RBA remains alert to anything that threatens its plan to bring down high inflation, especially after the monthly consumer price index increased unexpectedly in August. Executive Chairman of Yellow Brick Road Home Loans, Mike Bouris, has told Channel 9 the pressure has eased for the RBA as inflation heads in the right direction.
I think the RBA will probably, hopefully, look at it and say that the inflation is going in the right direction. So whilst in the last inflation number, it kicked up a little bit more than they expected, there was a lot of extraneous events that made that happen. So I think they stripped those out and it's still heading in the right direction.
In cricket, Australia have received a masterclass from star West Indies player Hayley Matthews in the second T20 match against the team. Mrs. Matthews smashed a century, helping her team run down a target of 213 at North Sydney Oval on Monday. As a result, West Indies pulled off the biggest chase in women's 2020 international history. Australia captain Alyssa Healy has congratulated Mrs. Matthews on her performance and says her team has a lot of work to do ahead of the next 4 games.
When 1 and 2 players, I think Steph Taylor as well got going today, when 2 players get going on a wicket like that, I mean, you saw Phoebe and Georgia at the end. It's pretty hard to stop, and if you're not quite executing with the ball, it makes it even harder, especially with only having 4 fielders out. So, look, fair play to them. I think it was an unbelievable knock. She came very close yesterday, threatened, but she's in some serious form, which we're going to have to contend with for the next 4 games.
I am Julien Heuillet. This is SBS News in Easy English.
We would like to